Can you sum up a bit for anyone that was living under a rock and didn't watch this test match, how they could possibly miss it? I don't know.
The team that England played, they were a bit below par today. They looked a bit iffy today. There's a reason for that.
I just didn't get the sense that the All Blacks sort of knew a way how to beat England.
We're again talking about inconsistencies.
It's just not working.
I think what England have when George Ford is playing is a coach.
Morning has been shambolic, and speaking of shambles, let's talk about Scotland.
The pressure is massively ramping up in Scotland now.
Their worst performance of the season by a country mile.
The game was won before the bench came on.
Glad I was cutting edge reporting as ever.
Home to the Emirates Dubai Sevens, Dubai is the ultimate sporting break. With a packed events calendar every year, including the DP World Tour Golf Championship and the Dubai Tennis Championships. There are lots of opportunities to witness world-class sport in action. And if you're looking to have your own active adventure holiday, you'll be spoilt for choice, whether that's hitting the paddle court or hiking the mountains of Hatta. Plan your getaway at visitdubai.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. My name is Alan Dimmick. I'm Commissioning Editor for Sport here at the Tel. And we're talking about a jam-packed weekend, triumph, disaster. We'll even be talking about transport in a bit and that'll become clear. However, plenty to get into. England defeated the All Blacks, and I suspect that that'll be a large part of what we end up talking about today, at least if I have anything to do with it. There was also the small matter of a Scotland game to get through. There was a victory for Wales. Ireland keep marching on. France, Fiji, that was a hell of a lot of fun. Anyway, let's start off by introducing Gavin Mayers and Charlie Morgan. And Gav, just your quickest hot take off the weekend. What was it like for you?
Well, England, we talked last week about them trying to get their big scalp, and they got it. And they got it in a really impressive fashion. And, I think it was a cracking weekend of Test rugby. Springboks winning again with 14 men. That seems to be all they need at the minute. We got nail-biter in Cardiff. We maybe not mention the Scotland game just yet. And overall...
Let's keep our powder dry for that.
Finally, on Saturday night, we saw a very impressive Ireland, back close to where they want to be. So, yeah, it's all. It was a really good weekend of rugby. But for me, the takeaway was just England. This is a sort of victory. I think that the big nations are now thinking that the Steve Borthwick side are going to be serious contenders at this World Cup.
Plenty of thinking to be done after that weekend as well. And Charlie Morgan, do you think England they must be chuffed? Would be an understatement for after their weekend's work.
They're always desperate, aren't they, to play down the significance of one-off games and to go week to week to week. And I think it was Jamie George or Ben Earl after they beat Fiji made the point that Steve Borthwick is incredibly good at isolating each week and working up to that. And they were just desperate not to put this game on that much of a pedestal. But I think everybody from the outside looking in, and surely them on the inside, thought that this was significant. And so it proved, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, you might notice that there's a certain figure not here at this point in time. That is Charles Richardson. He is actually on his way. He is winging his way to us from Edinburgh. He was actually at Scotland versus Argentina, and I'll be relieved to sort of point to someone else and say, you talk about that game, because there will be steam coming up my ears as we discuss that one. So he will be joining us to discuss that. We've got plenty to get through. But first up, we have to talk about England defeating the All Blacks. So, guys, England 33, New Zealand 19, and I suppose I'll start with you for this, Gav. Good value for it, England.
Very good value, and I think when you consider that they went 12-0 down quite quickly, and that could have seriously sort of popped the balloon of expectation and optimism that was swirling around.
Was in danger doing that as far as the atmosphere. I thought it was a little bit echoey and a bit flat as that happened.
Absolutely. And it was I guess the manner of way that they opened up the England defence, and it just felt like alarmingly it seemed like they were looking for the weak links, looking for George Ford at the wide channels where they could get their big men running at them, and that seemed to be, and again, England had a really good start but didn't take their chances, and we think, here we go again. It's going to be a New Zealand side, what they've just done against Ireland and Scotland, being clinical when it matters. But ultimately at the end, I don't remember seeing an All Black side like that certainly against the Northern Hemisphere side, getting so outplayed and outsmarted. And I think, Charlie, if you agree with me, they looked out-coached on the day. I think, when you look at that All Blacks, they've still got great athletes, still got great footballers who can win matches for them, but it was hard at times to understand what they were trying to achieve, whereas you could absolutely sense what England were trying to achieve, and they stuck by the process and, were comfortable winners in the end.
We are just saying this after every week that the team that England played, they were a bit below par today. They looked a bit iffy today. There's a reason for that. England are... that week-to-week focus that I was talking about earlier just allows them seemingly to really key in on what a side's strengths are and then to try and take them away. And now New Zealand, as you said, you called this before, I think you called it after the Scotland game where you said, look at a New Zealand side of old with maybe more know-how about them in test matches collectively, doesn't go 17-0 up and get pegged back. And New Zealand had at times in the game where they were able to impress what they'd clearly set out to do, but not for long enough. But I did think it really did constitute progress for England to come back from that deficit, because it's such a gut punch, isn't it? When you've in those big test matches, one of my big takeaways from the week is just like the one of the oldest cliches that you've got to win. There's so much content in these test matches that you feel like you've got to win them more than once because there's so many momentum swings. And England, I think everybody watching that's seen an England versus All Blacks test match would have been watching that opening going, they're not getting reward for this pressure. They're not getting reward for this pressure. And New Zealand went bang, bang. They scored out wide. George Ford's one of his very few mistakes of the game overhit restart. Cam Roigard with a sensational 50-22. And then they score off that as well. And it's 12-0 before you don't feel England play that badly.
Yeah.
So to get out of that hole is impressive.
And it reminded me of the World Cup quarterfinal. Ireland, All Blacks, they did exactly the same to Ireland. They got off the fast start. Ireland came back, but then if you think about how that All Black side, their attention to detail then was phenomenal, and that was a really world class battle of strategy. But it didn't feel like that. I just didn't get the sense that the All Blacks sort of knew a way how to beat England, having surrendered that lead. And it was 25 unanswered points, even before we got to the so-called Palm Squad coming on. And they came again a little bit, but England finished, really finished on top. And I have to say, I'm just very impressed at how, Charlie, as you said, that it felt like they were sort of 2 or 3 weeks in preparation for this one fixture, and everyone knew their roles, and everyone was prepared for setbacks and staying in the moment. And 12-0 down, they would have been frustrated that they had a good start and they left about 2 tries probably on those opening minutes. Then to go 12-0 down, that could have really been, as you say, a body blow. But you'd never sense that from them. And even we think of Steve Borthwick's side, line-out wasn't great on Saturday, and that, a lot of their launch plays come from that. But scrum was brilliant. Ford, real masterly performance for him, and so pleased for him given the sort of tricky cameo he had a year ago. But
I do want to talk about him in a bit more detail, actually. It's funny you were talking about the coaching there. I think Scott Robertson is going to live to regret that moment where he had his head in his hands. I suspect that's going to be shared about an awful lot, particularly if there was a point in the game where Scott Robertson sort of put his head in his hands. I can't remember the exact moment, but it got screen grabbed and it got shared about an awful lot. And there's an interesting... We talk an awful lot here about the England football manager and how much of a high pressure job that is, and Gareth Southgate didn't want it anymore because just the scrutiny on it is unbelievable. Being the head coach of the rugby team in New Zealand must be the same. Scott Robertson's got to be under an awful lot of pressure now, just with the amount of test matches that he's lost against teams that they traditionally might have just edged ahead of. You mean they've always been competitive with the top teams. You're right to point out, though, Charlie, that England probably deserve a lot more credit. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if there's enough credit going around. I think Jamie George made a point in the aftermath, didn't he, of saying, you guys have to be talking about George Ford. Also, just a doff of the cap, a couple of drop goals as well. Just can you sum up a bit for anyone that was living under a rock and didn't watch this test match, how they could possibly miss it? I don't know, but just a little bit about the detail that went into George Ford's game.
I just think he is seeing it, to use a cricket analogy that Eddie Jones might have been proud of. He's seeing it so big at the minute, and he's sensing momentum swings within games. And what England are, he's so articulate in the media with this, isn't he? George Ford, talking about these undulations and how actually so often in test matches it's not about switching away from what you've originally planned. It's about being more accurate and showing that tactical discipline by sort of almost hammering the rock until you get some pay with what your plan has been. Because if you've drilled it all week and you have the assets within a selection like Tom Roebuck, and you keep going to the air against a side that have looked iffy in the air this last year, then you're going to get pay. And I think that's what is impressing. George Ford is essentially exuding what is impressive about England, which is a real tactical discipline and a real ability, when it's in the balance, to come through with how they've prepared and with a strategy that they are all on board with and really committed to. You know, he even won a penalty in the backfield with a contestable high ball on Saturday. So he's, you know, which I've never seen him do before. But he's
was there a stepladder involved?
he actually, it was smart actually, hung up there, and I think it was Feinberg-Mngomezulu, just would have been so tempted to try and absolutely smoke him, and just couldn't quite wait till he'd come back to earth. And George Ford milked it a little bit, but very, very smart in the situation. I think it was when it was still 25-19, and it was just quite nice for him. He is always at pains to talk about, when you ask him a question about himself, George Ford, he will go, look, I promise you, I'm most interested in the team and an England team winning. But for him to have such an integral role in that, it was almost as though he said with that performance, yeah, it's all right. You can talk about how I've directed that actually a little bit.
Well, it's funny. It's I've got an anecdote about that. Is just a little bit of experience of this is. Before I worked here, I worked with a magazine. I was for a short while I was an editor of a magazine, and I remember years ago going to interview him and doing it, and he was fantastic, and he was really detailed. You know, it was very focused. If you asked him on something that he was concerned about, he was very focused on it, and he'd give you lots of detail. And at the end of it, it was like, "That's fantastic, great, thanks for that, George. So that you're going to be on the cover of the next magazine." 20 minutes later, a PR person came out and said, George has asked, can he please not be on the cover of the magazine? And it was like, that was him. He just didn't want to have the spotlight.
It's genuine. You know, it's genuine that I think there's two things with George Ford's.
He was the cover of that magazine.
I was going to say, how you get around it. Illustration.
Yeah. This stage of his career that I think what England have when George Ford is playing is a coach on the field. So you're not only getting messages coming on, but he is. You know, I think what Steve Borthwick said last week, he's a future England coach in the making. And when you've got a guy there is seeing things, that ability to see play two phases ahead of things, look where the weaknesses, look where the space is. You know, that we talked about New Zealand's 50-22, his 50-22, which was a culmination to Dingwall's try. That I think we were talking, I think, just moments before they got the turnover, and you could just see our angle of the pitch at that stage. You could see where the space was, but he had numbers as well, and you could see it took about 1 second for him to decide, no, the space is going for the kick, and it suddenly, and you could, and England were about to bring their subs on. It's like, you know, let them have one last play, another try done.
The Dingwall try was you used the word smart, and actually I think you could use that for describing that England-New Zealand game throughout the match from England. There was just little detail, like the fact that Dingwall scored, where it was like, well, Lawrence and him are in different positions, and Lawrence is trucking it up, and everyone in the world just expects that it's like, well, we're just going to have to double tackle on Lawrence here, and that'll be done. And there's just a slight shift of ball. It wasn't anything spectacular, but just solid line. Ball was exactly where it needed to be. Dingwall's through, and you could see the emotion in that team. They were just like, oh. Yeah. Everyone wanted to punch the air. The
other point just on George Ford as well. I did a piece for Saturday's paper about looking at his last year and that, you know, that people will remember the cameo he had last year against the All Blacks, missing drop goal, missing a penalty, and at the same time you had the emergence of Finn Smith, Marcus Smith. If people think it was Marcus Smith's time, when you're the other side of 30. and you have that, and you're seeing young guys coming through. I think it takes a lot for a player to be totally sort of almost, whether he reset his ambitions or not, but when we talk about him being selfless, it was a more selfish player, his head could have dropped and he could have
gone to Japan,
and he could have gone to Japan or gone to France, or decided this isn't for me. And
they would love him in France. Oh my God.
Well, one of the standout quotes from Steve Borthwick in the last couple of weeks was talking about how when George Ford wasn't in the 23, he was still England's best trainer.
Yeah.
And when you have a senior professional setting standards for younger players coming through, and they get to see how must a senior pro, he's not in the 23, how must he be feeling? And he's setting the example for everyone else, and that is priceless when you're trying to develop a squad, build experience, and show others what is expected to be a test player.
It's maybe worth spelling out, but imagine being a side going into a game and all week you've had George Ford trying to pick your defence apart, pick your backfield apart, and tell you where things could be better and where he would be looking to find space against you. That's so valuable. And then we saw that in the Six Nations, and then now he's the sort of main man with it. And he has shown an example to the two Smiths who will be competitive guys who we want to be getting back in somehow.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you guys how you think he dovetailed with Marcus Smith, because we obviously weren't expecting to see so much of him in that test match, and in the end it worked out
It was as good as you could have hoped. And it was obviously a blow losing Freddie Stewart so early in the match. But I thought I was really impressed with Marcus Smith. I thought he really added something to how England were trying to attack, and was really he just looked really up for as well. And that's the great thing about this. We've got England have got 3 10s, 10, 15. Finn can cover 12. They're in a really good place to have someone like George Ford who, as a senior pro, he will not sulk if he is rotated or dropped. And so I think it's a really strong position to be, that Finn will learn from rubbing, competing against George. And I think we've seen Marcus's game come on. I think Marcus really learned a lot on the Lions tour. I think that has really opened his eyes to what he needs to do to take his game a bit further. And when you have those 3 guys going at it, it's going to be a great place to see who ends up. And it may be that England don't end up with a settled 10. It might just be...
I think that might be the case in a few positions, and that's maybe a massive cop out, because I know a lot of listeners have sort of asked us, say, what happens when Tommy Freeman's fit? What happens when Elliot Daly's fit? George Furbank? It's hard, and it's going to be very difficult for Steve Borthwick, but he'll have to sort of just keep tailoring these selections to opponents. One point I wanted to make on the Marcus Smith thing, or 2, please, is first, he is a tangible focal point for the Twickenham crowd. I don't know whether you feel like, I just feel like at the beginning of the second half, if he wasn't first, he was second to do that little sprint out that he does, gets people on their feet. He was infectious with his energy for the side, I thought. And England, they were doing this before Freddie Stewart went off, and to stress, Freddie Stewart played pretty well, I thought. But England moved the ball to space they kicked a lot, kicked 35 times in the game, which is actually weirdly bang on their average for the year. They kicked more than New Zealand, but from those crumbs that they won, and those they caught clean ball through Roebuck a few times, they moved the ball, and that was really important. If you think about the lead up to Ford's second drop goal, it's a cleanly won box kick that they move the ball and they get the ball through the hands of Ford, and then it's Dingwall, and Smith hits the line beautifully to fix Carter on the right wing and feed Feoboso. All of a sudden, they've gone from their own 22 to the New Zealand 22, and then they can make the decision, do we go for the drop goal or go for something more? But moving through, they just want to move through the sort of between the 22s as efficiently as possible. They can't just do that through kicking. They've got to be able to move the ball as well. Now they're managing to do that, which is exciting for them.
Hat tip to Aussie Rules for crumbs, which has made
Is it
its way
Aussie
to
Rules?
the. I believe that's where it's from. I remember speaking to a player a couple of years ago, and they're like, "Oh yeah, contestable kicks. You're looking for the crumbs from that when it falls out." So thank you to Australia. It's probably the last time you hear anyone say that this week. The Ashes start this week, by the way. Please keep your eye on everything that the Telegraph Sport are doing. I wanted to talk just briefly about the bench. And the impact, and I'm not going to use the phrase that we used so liberally the other day, but the row of thorns on the Red Roses bench that came on, particularly there's one fella who we have spoken an awful lot about, but he just seems to keep delivering on Test match. We'll get on to Henry Pollock, but Gav, the bench, was that the smartest use of the replacements you've seen from England under Borthwick?
I think so. I mean, I think I've been impressed through the autumn how it's worked and how he's stuck by it, and this was the match. We spoke about it last week.
It helps when guys like Joe Hayes, who maybe people didn't know too much about, just picking him as a random example, really put their hand up and really
massively,
raise their game.
I mean, Joe Hayes, again, we talk about other personalities in the team, but you get someone like Joe Hayes scrummaging. I thought England's scrum was fantastic at the weekend, but also his defensive work. He's a workhorse, and Finn Baxter as well. And the key thing about this autumn, you're starting to build towards the World Cup in 2 years' time. You want to get the younger players. You want to get caps in them. But what these two young props have done is really demonstrate that they are of Test quality already, and it just gives Borthwick the luxury of turning to such experienced props when he needs them, and but at the same time, as you say, it's like, I think we said before, this was the game would test the strategy. England had to be in the game before they used their bench, and at 12-0 down, we were thinking this might have backfired, but it just shows you the quality of the players that they're starting with, that we are now seeing an England squad with the greatest depth that I can remember for many years now. There are, the fact that they can, the game was won before the bench came on. That's, it's 25-12, the game was won. I can't see them losing it from there, but you bring the bench on, and they then make this an imperious victory. It's to put that many points on the All Blacks. And I know South Africa had a sort of massive statement victory in Wellington in September, but there's not many teams take the All Blacks apart like that like the way England did on Saturday. And it's just going to be fascinating how this evolves. And there will be times when the senior, they won't need to do this. But then again, look at, say, Finn Baxter and Joe Hayes coming on. They will be confident of making a similar impact.
They really good point on the caps. I just sort of was looking that up while you're talking. Both of them made their 17th Test matches together, and they were excellent. Yeah, they kind of, Borthwick wants a mobile pack, doesn't he? He keeps talking about want players that can run. And that sounds really sort of like a bear thing. Yeah,
no
obviously.
Joy, yeah.
Be a bit of a problem if they couldn't run. But they are really nimble, really robust as well. And they set the tone there as props. They make a lot of tackles. They make a lot of really robust tackles as well. Finn Baxter especially, it's not advisable to head down his channel.
Okay, and a shout, I did say we talk about Henry Pollock. It feels like we're contractually obliged to talk about Henry Pollock at this stage. Charlie, it just is, I'm just waiting for the moment where he'll be overawed.
I've interviewed him a couple of times so when he was in England's 20, and felt mad to say at the time, but it just felt like his self-confidence was bulletproof in the sense, not that he's going to keep backing it up, because he's going to make the odd mistakes. He gaffed one from the foot of a scrum, didn't he? I think against Fiji. Yeah. But bulletproof in the sense that he'll just keep coming. He's just relentless. And
tried to jump into Maro Itoje's arms after a penalty award early doors. Felt like a gaff to me.
Yeah. But he's just really enjoying it. It's if you play a cam him, He's a really good quote that someone, an age group coach, said to me about him was that I know it looks like Henry Pollock loves the camera, and he does, but he's been doing that sort of thing from when he was 16 years old, playing against his mum and his dad, and then the other mums and dads. He's just a real. He just exudes this real refreshing enjoyment. And what's actually quite heartening, I think, is that England's coaches and England's senior players haven't really tried to dampen that. They've just given him a long leash to be himself. I think Ellis Genge is really sort of instrumental with that, really kind of empathetic leadership.
It's a really good point, Charlie, that on a wider point of Henry Pollock and the kind of match day experience now watching this England team, that we had the presentation against a Haka. You've got, I saw one stage Ellis Genge screaming with passion to the crowd. You've got the expectation that the bench is coming on and Pollock on the sidelines revving it up, and it's
having licked his lips whilst watching.
Having licked his lips and then sort of disappeared. Said, "Lads, over to you." But I can remember when Chris Ashton came on the scene and he did his ash splash and everyone was tut-tut-tutting. And this was, we were asking Martin Johnson, was he allowed to do this?
He could have dropped it.
Yeah. Obviously society's changed, rugby's changed since then, but it just struck me on after the match on Saturday that you have Steve Borthwick whose persona is anything but all that razzmatazz, and he is very much a sort of, he's not an old school coach, but he's an old school attitude of what it takes to be a test match player. And he remembers what he went through as an England player. And they weren't always happy times and they weren't always collective and it wasn't always team first. But he has allowed this kind of personality from his team to come out, and not only come out, but flourish. And, we're seeing players on, doing messages, social media, funny things. It's just such a really interesting dynamic of.
I can see inside you. There's two wolves, Gav. The rugby purist that's like, oh, this doesn't quite sit right, and then just going, actually, you know what? Just give yourself over to it, enjoy it. I could see the internal tension with inside you.
Absolutely, but also it must be even much more so for Steve Borthwick, and I guess it's maybe
you're right. It's not his natural persona.
A sign of his leadership, maybe the fact that his authority is such now that he is comfortable in letting others do things that they want to do in their way, and I think it's just making it really quite a fun team.
There's a level of swagger to them, which I think if you're used to supporting teams against England, and I have family members that are used to doing that, that's the way it should be. England should have that, that should have that swagger really, and that they're leaning into that quite well. I think leaning into it in quite a smart way, because it's clearly against, as we say, it's against the sort of what Steve Borthwick would be like outwardly as a personality, but he's allowed that to happen, and I think it's working for him. Can I stick with you just quickly before we move on, Gav? Is on Steve Borthwick, knowing him as you do, this was an incredible moment. Some would say the finest of his coaching career thus far. So what do you do against the Pumas? Do you stick or do you twist or do you tinker? What do you do?
Give a lot of thought about this last night, and I think the majority, if you're looking at the pros and cons of it all, go for the jugular, back up the team, show loyalty and what they've done for you. I think that's what will be the format of the selection. But I also think this is a game where there is a chance, when we talk about building experience, caps, there's also players like Elliot Daly who is fit again. I'd love to see how he will fit, what he can add through the form that he showed with the Lions. So I think ultimately I could see a little bit of tinkering, a little bit of freshening up, but I think you're going to see a pretty consistent approach to selection for the next 18 months. I don't think we're going to see massive rotation.
So little tinkers rather than...
And what a position to be in, Al. Like, if you think of being able to tinker from a position of strength is what any coach wants to be in. And you can you're working at things out and seeing how combinations work or maybe don't work. But you still know that you're not really taking a risk in doing so.
Well, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Shocker. We're going to be talking about Scotland next.
Home to the world-renowned Emirates Dubai Sevens, Dubai is the ultimate destination for a sporting break. With a packed events calendar every year, including the DP World Tour Golf Championship and the Dubai Tennis Championships. There are lots of opportunities to witness world-class sport in action. Away from the stands, you'll find plenty of ways to have an active adventure holiday of your own. Try your hand at paddle, the world's fastest-growing sport. Walk the breathtaking hiking trails of the Hatter Mountains. Or rent a bike and cycle alongside spectacular skylines. The only problem will be deciding which you want to do first. Swap the winter chill for sunshine and plan your sporty getaway at visitdubai.com.
Well, say his name and he shall appear. Charles Richardson has joined us. Charles, just explain to the listeners and viewers why you are late to this recording.
So I was at Murrayfield yesterday, where I had a ball because it was a mad game, and then I had an early flight this morning back from Edinburgh to London Heathrow, and my flight was delayed by an hour by British Airways because one of the smoke detectors in one of the loos on the plane wasn't working. What an absolute farce. Surely a plane could take off, British Airways, without a smoke detector or one of those. Just close the toilet. There were loads. And then I had Circle Line chaos from Paddington as well.
No one's interested in that.
No, but
I just want to know...
My morning has been shambolic. And speaking of shambles, let's talk about Scotland.
Do we have to? Yes, let's do it. I genuinely thought you were going to tell us that you were going to be chomping on a cigar in that bathroom because you could.
Yeah.
Or perhaps a Galwaz is more in keeping with your character. So... Scotland 24, Argentina 33. Topsy-turvy would not do this test match justice. Charles, you were there to see Scotland absolutely launching a 21-point lead into the sea. Just how bananas a game was that?
Absolute bananas is completely right. I mean, there were just so many things to unpick from it because for 55 minutes, Scotland were cruising. Everyone has focused on the last 20 minutes, and I understand why it was so dramatic, so thrilling. Even Gregor Townsend afterwards focused on that. For me, when dissecting that game afterwards, Argentina was so bad for 50 minutes. Their worst performance of the season by a country mile for 50 minutes. And really, I think a better side than Scotland, or a more ruthless side certainly, would have been far more than 21 points ahead. At that point, that is what cost them. It really is that they did not capitalise. They did not take advantage.
Well, you're saying that for a second week in a row, Scotland were not clinical in the red zone.
I am saying that. I think that really, one of the better sides would have been a 30 points plus ahead of Argentina, the way that they were going yesterday. And Scotland really, in that 55 minutes, they played some nice stuff, but they were cruising. They were 6 out of 10, maybe 7 at a push. They needed to put the foot on the throat in that 55 minutes, identify that Argentina were just not at the races at all. And if they'd have got to 30, 40 points, it wouldn't have mattered who Argentina had brought off the bench. The game would have been done.
The Bomba Squadra?
La Brigada Bomba is what we've gone with in the report. Yeah, the Bomb Brigade. The Bomb Brigade.
Fantastic. Well, just to stay, so a lot has been made about boos ringing out afterwards. By the way, totally understandable. How bad, genuinely, did it feel like the crowd had turned on the home side?
I had two-pronged answers to that question. Firstly, it did a bit because we had a bloke in front of the press box who, and the Scottish coaches sit behind you at the Murrayfield press box, who turned around and gave them a load of spray at the end. It wasn't that venomous, but he wasn't happy with the fact that when they were trailing towards the end, Scotland kept on kicking the ball away, which I understand the frustration, but at the same time, they were inside their own 22. However, I did also sort of have my own my own Chris Kamara moment with this booing, because in the chaos at the end of the match, literally, in the chaos at the end of the match, I was frantically rewriting my entire match report that we needed to get online rapidly. And then as I was making my way down to the press conference area, the editors here in the Telegraph offices called me and said, "Was there booing at the end?" And I just had to go,
Was there?
I don't know. I don't know. Because I was just so focused on trying to get this. And so I asked some of the other journalists. They were like, "Yeah, there was booing at the end." I was like, "Oh, good. Glad I was cutting edge reporting as ever," as I think Jeff Stelling says.
So, Charlie, you were saying that you watched this one with intrigue. So, unlike me, you weren't probably hiding behind the couch. I mean, firstly, yes, let's give Argentina their due for coming back. And you were actually just singing the praises of Carreras.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I said last week I got a weirdly close-up view of him in the Wales game because the press box in Cardiff is so low, and yeah, his low centre of gravity, his pace, how explosive he is.
Sorry, which Carreras are we talking about?
Mateo, this one, sorry, because Santiago was part of the Bomba Brigada.
Brigada Bomba.
Sorry, A-level Spanish let me down. But
I'll be taking the pen out in a second.
Just an outstanding player. I thought Mateo was extremely influential off the bench, but I thought in said match report you said that Argentina looked disinterested is strong a term, and clearly they're not in it with a test match, but they drifted through a lot of that game, and but they are a very volatile side. They are capable of big brain fades over the course of long patches of games, but they can also have purple patches that are pretty irresistible.
But then 4 of their tries came from like a metre out as well, which is very sort of un-Argentina, or at least not very in keeping with the Argentina that we've grown to know and love this year.
That is because Scotland had to scramble defensively, because by that stage of the game, Argentina were lunging forward 20 metres at a time with carries, and Scotland just seemed terrified of giving away penalties because the penalty count was racking up.
Yeah.
And they just chewed off huge chunks of yardage at the end of that game, and it just felt like an onslaught. I think I described it before we recorded this segment. It just felt like an avalanche at the end.
That Sione Tuipulotu after the game used that exact word regarding the indiscipline. To be fair, he said it was an avalanche of penalties, and it was a yellow avalanche.
Which, to be fair, probably
let's leave yellow snow out of it. But you know, there was an avalanche of penalties, and but then they lost all composure as well. And also, what was really weird about Scotland yesterday as well, I just thought like some of their better players and things that happen when Scotland are ticking just weren't happening. They were quite absent. Like Tuipulotu in the second half, you didn't really know who was playing, in all honesty, attack or defence. There were none of the nice little wraparounds with Finn Russell where he's taking it to the line and holding 4 defenders and passing over behind his back. There was none of that. You didn't get any of those nice pullbacks from Hutchinson at 13. Finn sort of drifted in and out. Kinghorn ended up getting yellow carded and defensively still looks a little bit shaky. Darcy Graham has missed a simple one-on-one tackle at the end on Picardo for their final try. Admittedly, they were losing anyway by that point. And it just seemed like, there was sort of it was cold at Murrayfield, which is why I sort of maybe thought that the Argies didn't sort of fancy it in the first half, because it was only about 4 or 5 degrees. And I was like,
I'm really glad you said that, because I'd said that off air and wanted to keep it off air because I just thought it sounded mad. But I was watching it going, did they not fancy this because it's cold?
Yeah, well, I was just wondering that. And then it just before the comeback, like Scotland were just cruising. They had them at scrum time. Everything was going Scotland's way. But again, I don't think they ever didn't put it to bed. They were never
until the moment where patience would have done the job, and for some reason, just because Scotland were probably giddy with having 21 unanswered points on the board, Finn Russell, 10 metres out, throws a missed pass that lands between 2 lads, and then suddenly Argentina just go, this is it. And then it's downhill sledding for them the whole way. A lot of winter sports references.
I think the pass that he wanted to give, I can't remember who was out wide on the wing for it. I think the pass that he wanted to give, the long pass to the touchline, I think they would have scored, but it was too long. I don't think he had it in him. I think that's why it fell short, because I don't think he had that. It was a monster pass, and you could see if he hit him. I think he sort of shaped a kick, then got caught in indecision. And I mean, they did very well, ironically, to scramble back and stop them from scoring. Argentina, like some of the defence was amazing. In fact, the tackles from Steyn and Kinghorn tracking back to stop a try were some of the biggest cheers of Murrayfield yesterday, the whole game. Each individual one, but then Kinghorn ended up getting yellow carded in that move later on for being offside, accumulation of penalties. Then Argentina Montoya just about burrows over, bit dubious that try, but the TMO gave it, and then it was an onslaught from then. Floodgates.
I'm going to rewind, and subscribers and viewers will remember this from last week, where you, Charles, asked me, is the pressure ramping up? Something along those lines of, after a match went begging where Scotland could have beaten the All Blacks for the first time in history, is the pressure mounting? And I said, let's see how it goes against Argentina, because that is the match that they've probably circled on the calendar as the one that, if to be taken seriously, they should win. Well, guess what? The pressure is massively ramping up in Scotland now. You'll have seen some of the discourse that's going on up there. People are not happy, and I don't know whether it was the Wheatos professor or Einstein or whichever scientists were attributing with this apocryphal quote of, if you keep doing the same things again and expecting different results, that's madness. Well, I feel like we've seen this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Is that these big test matches where Scotland finally get measured against other teams that we'll see where they truly stand, they just haven't hit the mark still.
And really, they're going to come out of this autumn now with an absolute shellacking against the US, which meant nothing to anybody. And then there is nothing that could happen, I don't think, against Tonga next week that would improve the mood music.
No.
Even if they won 100-0.
This will potentially infuriate Scotland fans, but it feels like from a mentality standpoint, Scotland have almost gone backwards to where England were 12 months ago, where they're getting in sort of it feels like they're getting around the sort of last quarter of games and fading. They're compromised a little bit by depth, I guess.
I asked Gregor about this afterwards. I said, look, you saw England yesterday, what they did with their bench. You've just seen what Argentina have done with their bench. Obviously, we know all about what South Africa do with their bench, and France in the Six Nations went 7-1. New Zealand even had, Satiti, Damien McKenzie, others on the bench. Like, you start with your best team, and then there is a notable drop, really, when the bench comes on. And he said that he might look at it. he could look at it, is what he said. And I was sort of going,
Sounds like he wanted to get out of that press conference.
I think you should be looking at it, really, because that's 2 weeks. I mean, New Zealand, yes, but they never led. They never led against New Zealand. They fought it back to a draw, which was admirable, and then it felt like a missed opportunity. Against Argentina, 21-0.
So, obviously, and I think it would be a bit facetious of me to just point directly at the coaches and lay it all on their door, because the players were the ones that were on the field. They were 21 points ahead. The senior players could have taken that game by the scruff of the neck, and it got away from them. I mean, I think we're going to be looking back on this as, I can't remember a greater capitulation in my time.
I think it was the 7th biggest test comeback ever in the history of international rugby.
Wow. So, I mean, if you were a neutral watching that game, you had a hell of a time. You undoubtedly did.
Absolutely.
But there's an elephant in the room with this, and you cannot ignore the fact that Gregor Townsend is under huge pressure. I'm not joking when I say that I'm hearing really angry noises from people saying, what is changing? What is changing? Because just beating England quite a few times is not enough. There's got to be more. With that, we were sort of told not to worry too much about Gregor Townsend's role with advising Newcastle Red Bulls. I'm sure in the coming days and hours, probably we'll hear a bit more about that. Charles, I'd be interested in your thoughts, though. Do you think that has an impact?
Well, he's always maintained that it's completely separate to his role with Scotland, that it's in his, in its spare time. I mean, the only real people and person who's going to know if it is having a material impact is Gregor and the players. And if he doesn't think it is, and if they don't think it is, then it may be a bit of a red herring. But
it's fair to ask about.
Absolutely, and I understand. And he surely must know the PR surrounding it. Yeah, the optics around him doing that when the team are doing that. If you're on I'm not saying Steve Borthwick should do this, but if you're on a 10-11 game test winning streak and you go and do this, then maybe it's a little bit more palatable for fans. But when you're doing things like you did yesterday in Murrayfield, when you're not getting over the line against New Zealand, when you are the paragon of inconsistency, that's when it's very easy for the public to go, well, hang on a minute, what are you doing? I mean, as a sort of slightly incidental point and sort of slightly tangential, I don't actually think yesterday means anything for what Scotland are going to do in the Six Nations. I mean, it just confirms what we already knew, that they're wildly inconsistent and they could be great and they could be not very good. And really, yesterday completely confirmed all of those thoughts. They could quite easily finish second or fifth.
I heard a Charlie Morgan hot take the other day that potentially that this World Cup draw, completely unfussed about it. I mean, for Scotland, this probably doesn't change the task ahead of them at a Rugby World Cup, does it?
No, they're unproven, and if they play to their potential, they could knock off good teams. If they switch off and their lack of depth hurts them, they can do stuff like this.
There was a quantity of points, I can't remember now because there were so many figures knocking about yesterday, where if Scotland had won by, and at 21-0, they were easily leading by that amount. If they had won by that number of points, and then France had beaten Australia this coming weekend, and England beat Argentina this coming weekend, which are probably both sort of likely occurrences, Scotland would have muscled into the top 6 in the world rankings and been in the top band for the draw. And so that also feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. Not as important as it used to be with the wider pools and with 24 teams.
And also the teams that would be in the second band,
opportunity.
there would likely still be a good competitive team.
Just on the World Cup, we should talk about the draw, but I think the frustrating thing for Scotland, and we talked about the opportunity of not, if they'd beaten the All Blacks, that sort of golden opportunity,
greatest November ever,
would have given them a foundation stone to really push on for. But now you're looking around at all the other teams, the other Six Nations rivals, thinking, midpoint now towards Australia 27, teams are starting to make moves. We're seeing development, evolution. With Scotland, as you say, Charlie, we don't know any more, any less. It's like on their day they can beat England at Twickenham, or they can easily lose a game like that on Sunday. So if I'm a Scotland fan, I would be frustrated to go, look, I'm looking at what England have been doing. Ireland have started to turn it around last week. Wales, taking baby steps, but and Italy again, coming forth. It's like when you want to see a team starting to move on from where they've been and not look back. It's it feels a difficult place to see any sort of sense of optimism at the minute in terms of that.
Rest of the weekend, we got, I'll come to you on this actually, Gav, Ireland clicking. Ireland 46, Australia 19. I mean, Australia look weary, but for Ireland, this is the result that this is a performance that they probably were worried they might not get at some point this November.
Yeah, I think two good sides. Australia did look tired, and it looked like an awful wet night in Dublin. And what you saw was for the first time, Ireland really starting in a manner that we haven't actually really seen them start like that for a good year. That when they're at their peak in 22, 23, they would be the side that would come out and blitz teams and play at a tempo and lovely shape and options everywhere. We haven't seen that for a bit. That we saw a really strong start, but also I think what would have pressed Andy Farrell, the kicking game, given that Australia's strength in the air, it was actually Ireland that really won that battle comfortably, and a glorious hat-trick of tries for Mac Hansen coming back, starting at fullback for the first time in an international. So I just think, from the sort of the doubts, frustrations of their defeat in Chicago, underwhelming win over Japan, Andy Farrell really spoke as sort of firmly as we've seen publicly about his players need to get over themselves and really deliver. And I think they did that.
A coming of age game for Prendergast.
Potentially, yeah. I mean,
I think I saw someone say it was his first drop goal ever in a pro game.
Yeah. He was talking about doing it at sort of schools, sort of second, third form schools, and but yeah, I thought it was his best game really in over a year for Ireland, and again, it's that they're benefiting from this rivalry at 10. Paddy McCarthy again. 22-year-old Lou said looks, there's talk about when he gets to pair it up with his brother Joe in the Ireland pack, it's going to be give him real punch. But I mean, the thing that is probably most glorious of all is it's setting ourselves up for a cracking game. I will be over in that game myself at the Aviva. Springboks, number one team in the world. They have been doing all the evolution that you could want and more this year. And as we said, have won successive games with 14 men for most of those contests. So
yeah, I saw a message going around on social media from Gus Analyst, I think it was, where he said, "Here's the team sheet for next weekend," and it was a full team, but at number 5 they just had a red card.
Yeah.
Which is just good stuff. I mean, they so South Africa beat Italy 32-14, and Charlie, what more can we say about where Springboks are? I mean, interestingly, Rassie Erasmus hasn't won in Dublin.
Yeah,
really?
We just know
that
how
right, Jeremy?
That is right.
Producer Jeremy tells us that's right.
We know how fired up, motivated he and his whole setup are by those new goals. It's actually probably pretty useful that he has a new goal like that to go after back-to-back World Cups.
If I was being cynical, I'd say this is actually a real thing to rail against, as opposed to
they had
imagined.
I think this and the game in Paris, the sort of rematch for the last quarterfinal, will have framed this tour for them. And yeah, that's going to be fascinating. They were, I think, for Springbok supporters to see their side winning, see them battling through kind of quite sticky games while having something to really feel sort of slighted by. That just must be nirvana for them. They must be delighted to have that sort of state of mind. And yeah, how good's that going to be?
It's going to be awesome. And they last met, it was at that stage on the tour, Ireland went on tour in South Africa. It was billed as kind of, number one v number two, who was the best team in the world. And Rassie was really firing it up and won the first test. Ireland won the second test to finish 1-1. So, I mean, you could see the two sides. It's, Ireland, I think, third up. It's not, they're not quite at that same pitch. But I think the way Ireland played against Australia, and also there was times where Australia got back into the game, Ireland finished really strongly. And I think Farrell was impressed by that sort of ruthlessness in how they actually really went after Australia. And, in stark contrast, Charles, what you saw in Murrayfield, it's like the game's, let's just keep going, 2 late tries. Another week in camp, I think Ringrose sounds like he will be fit again. It will be, I think, and at the minute with the 2 results for the Republic of Ireland as well, there seems to be sort of sporting mania in Dublin at the minute. So we'll see if that manages to translate to the Aviva.
Whereas coming from Scotland, there was sporting anxiety, I think, with rugby yesterday, and then with the Scottish football team as well.
Big match against Denmark on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I thought that actually Maxime Lucu being taken out by a goalpost would have been the maddest thing that I'd see on a rugby pitch last weekend. However, how is that a red card for Franco Mostert? As in a permanent red. And I know we ranted last week about
we did, yeah. So
it was absolutely deserved on Lou Diaga. But
you are the man to talk about this because you're. I don't think you've been sacked from your hypothetical ruler of world rugby.
No. So let's carry on.
So it's another weekend where we're again talking about inconsistencies.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. It all comes down fundamentally to what we said last week, and what I wrote last week is that it's just not working. It's just not working. At Murrayfield, we had over a 5-minute TMO intervention for foul play. I can't even remember what it was for now, but it was over 5 minutes of wasted time. And I thought this was all supposed to go to the bunker to speed things up. So if the bunker's not speeding things up and we're still getting wrong decisions, what's the point in it all? It's all become too confusing. If you were a new fan coming to this, you just turn away straight away. Imagine explaining all of this to somebody who'd come from Mars. You wouldn't know where to start. Diaga, I mean, Garbisi has been tackled by another South African defender and knocked him off course at the last minute. He is a shoulder to the head. There is head contact. But that is not what... World Rugby, as we understand it, have instructed its referees to be stronger with permanent reds, but the permanent red is for egregious foul play. Diaga maybe just about at a push met that threshold. Mostert, yes, on last weekend. That wasn't egregious foul play. He was bent at the hips. Yes, his shoulder did connect with the head, but he was bent at the hips. Looks like he's wrapping. It was a bit ugly, but then there is a massive mitigation in the fact that Garbisi changes course at the last minute because a fellow South African defender takes him from the side. I think South Africa have been really hard done by that.
The yellow card to Cody Taylor at Twickenham was
also harsh.
Yeah,
almost inexplicable as well.
Yeah.
Earls was also harsh as well, to be honest. Like, it was, both of them were pretty quick fire. But I suppose if Piardi's given one to New Zealand, then it makes sense to do it to Earl, and it was both pretty quick.
So for those that didn't watch it, a bit of context here is the All Blacks did not give away a single penalty. And then the very first penalty that they gave away at a breakdown resulted in a yellow card.
Having been called in by the TMO.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it happened just below where we were in the stand. And, at the time, I'm just not sure that's what the TMO should be getting involved in as an intervention. And, if the referee doesn't see it, the touch judge, assistant ref who's there a yard away, and in the sense, to me, it didn't meet any threshold for TMO intervention.
And to be fair to Razor and Scott Barrett afterwards, the two Scots, they would said it was completely fair, and they were pretty magnanimous with it, didn't they?
I thought Robertson had more to say on that.
Really?
Yeah.
But they did both say, which to be fair is factual, that it was cynical and it was silly, and if you're going to do sort of cynical, silly things at rucks, then you a bit like Diaga, exactly. Then you take the risk, don't you? Of the punishment that you get.
Yeah.
Well, this just in. Wales have arrested the slide. They've won a test match at home. Wales 24, Japan 23. Emotional scenes. And if you're out there and you're thinking, well, why would they be jumping up and down to celebrate a last-minute kick? And by the way, Jared Evans to knock over that last penalty to win the game. Fair play to him. He was a very late substitute in that match. Japan played really good stuff. They were just good fun, and Wales were just sort of all over the shop as they have been in recent years. But to guts it out, regardless of how you feel about whether a nation with the rugby history of Wales, where they should be against someone like Japan, the fact that they got this result and had that, what a moment for Steve Tandy, Charlie, to just to have that, and also just, no one, I don't think anyone's fooling themselves and going, well, Wales are now suddenly a very good team, because they did still just get scalped they got 50 put on them by Argentina the week before, but still, hell of a moment for them.
Hell of a moment. I think, cannot stress the point enough that it will seem galling that those scenes are happening after a 1-point win over Japan, but that is very much where Wales are and where they need to build from. And it's not going to be a straight line. They've got the All Blacks and the Springboks in coming weeks. There was a fantastic moment at full time when Steve Tandy sort of thinking he's just shaking the hands of his assistant coaches. He's gone to go down the tunnel or go down the tunnel to the sort of bowels of the stadium. He sees Dave Redden in the back, sort of arms crossed, Dave Redden, who's sort of overseeing this infrastructural sort of revamp, and he turns around straight away, very David Brent.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Very David Brent meeting his date in the pub and going back to the camera. But there's all sorts happening. It's going to be tricky. Navigating the next fortnight and two pretty horrible, intimidating fixtures. It'll be very interesting to see how Wales kind of come through.
Just on Wales and Argentina and Scotland bringing it all together. When Scotland were 21-0 up and into the second half, I had written in my notes how bad were Wales last week with obviously Argentina putting 50 points on them and then trailing 21-0, and then look what happened. So that was all deleted. Maybe they were all right.
Under the roof, a bit warmer.
Yeah, maybe they were all right, Wales.
So before we get on to your questions, and thanks again for anyone who ever sends them in, Charlie Morgan, we've got this sort of roadmap, I think is the word that we could use to describe the tests that are coming at the moment. I've now forgotten the official name for it again. What is it called?
Rugby Nations Championship.
Yes, there we go. The Rugby Nations Championship rolls off the tongue. It's your favourite, my favourite. It's going to be launching, and it kind of changes how November is going to look from next year. Can you fill us in, please?
Yeah, well, it's a move from the Six Nations and SANZAAR to give more jeopardy, more meaning to the two international windows in July and November. And what they've done is chosen to sort of split the hemispheres and pit them against each other. So you've got the Six Nations on one side, and they'll be in one table against, and this is separate to the Six Nations tournament to be very clear. So this Rugby Nations Championship, you will have the Six Nations in one table. You will have the Rugby Championship nations, so Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, plus Fiji and Japan in another. And in these cross-hemisphere games in July and November, they will count towards separate hemisphere tables. And then there will be a finals day whereby the top plays the top. Well, it starts sixth plays the sixth and all the way up to a grand final where the top plays the top. And they feel that it's a way of generating more broadcast revenue, more interest in these fixtures, it's very funny, isn't it? Sort of you get non-rugby fans and maybe casual rugby fans sort of quite interested that these November and July games are essentially friendlies, which is what they are really, although we sort of try and make a bit of jeopardy out of the world rankings, especially when the World Cup draw comes around, but that's what they really are. And this is just an attempt to sort of, I guess, coordinate this and put a big trophy.
And in November, we're used to southern teams coming over here and hopping around from nation to nation, but maybe people would want or expect more of a traditional tour in our summertime, but that just changes the complexion of that now, doesn't it?
It means a lot of air miles for Northern Hemisphere sides in July because, so for example, England are playing South Africa when this kicks off, so July 4th, 2026, they're then going to England, this is then going to Fiji, then they will take on Argentina. So they're hopping around a fair amount, and I guess it's more palatable for Southern Hemisphere teams to do that around Europe because the distance is just much easier.
Time zone distance. The flight, base yourself in London. I think the other, I guess, from a traditionalist point of view, the sad thing about this, we'd got to a place where the three test tours had got to a really good place. We saw that the last time this happened before the World Cup, we had everyone going 1-1. It was 1-1, and I think the sad thing as well is just for the players, and this is certainly in the July window. The players are going to, it's going to be, if you're England, I think England's plans at the minute, they're going to have to play South Africa probably in Johannesburg, maybe play Fiji in Pretoria, and then fly to Buenos Aires to play Argentina. And there's, of course, 3 Saturdays. So any sense of being in a country, building up, sort of creating a narrative in the media of where
England versus Fiji in Pretoria.
I know, seriously. So that's the issue. And I can understand they're doing this really for broadcast value. Let's be honest about this. It's an easier thing to sell as a package to both bringing the 2 windows together with a competitive narrative.
Is it going to be the end of players being rested? How we've seen players rested for summer tours when, you've played a lot of rugby, you have the summer off because we'll go to South Africa, there's 3 tests, and because it's against the same opposition, both sides might do a bit of rotation in those tests. Whereas now, when they actually matter, there's a table and a final, are they just going to go, they're going to have to go full throttle every summer, and players are not going to get the time off?
I thought this with because France are going to New Zealand for the first round of it at the start of July, and obviously France have copped a bit of heat for not bringing over sort of top 14 finalists and senior players that they just want to rest, and they're not going to compromise that by putting much of onus on those July windows. I wonder whether that. I can't really see France going, oh, right, Nations Championship. But
they play New Zealand a week after the top 14 final next year.
Yeah, so they're just not going to have the best players.
So they're not going to have the top 14 finalists presumably playing New Zealand next year because how can you can't
round
get
through? Round 2 they've got Oz. I'm
just going to go out on a limb and assume that that's going to be Toulouse players.
Yeah, well, Galtier will be hoping it's not. Galtier will be hoping that Toulouse don't get to the final. The other thing is that I noticed in this, which is a slightly secondary point, but Twickenham is hosting all the finals, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 2 games each day. I know the playing surface is a carpet, but 6 games in 3 days, and the last one is the main showpiece event, first v first, after it's had 5 matches on it beforehand. But they're going to
stoop.
Well, this is the thing. It does say London, but then in other stories, and I think we've reported that it does say Twickenham. Would they look at Spurs? Would they look at Wembley for the finals? They can't play 6 games in 3 days on one pitch, surely.
The other slightly odd thing about this, Al, is that next summer we will see the South Africa and All Blacks returning to a traditional tour series, greatest ever rivalry at the expense of the Rugby Championship. So it's moving. just we're moving away from 3 test tours. They're saying that this is a valuable thing to do. So it's slightly contradictory. What is the value of this? And I think, everyone loves a series that goes 1-1 and you get the best out of both sides in the 3rd test. We're just going to have a series of one-off fixtures.
I think reading between the lines here as well, is we're getting used to seeing the Springboks play a test match at Twickenham or at Wembley, for example, trying to draw crowds to a match which isn't their traditional home. We're used to seeing New Zealand and Ireland in particular playing out in the US. It just feels a little bit like there's more room here for you can maybe take that test match and you can play it in San Diego, or you can take it somewhere else in the world.
At best.
Yeah.
# Middle East, surely.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of a vibe about that. Okay, let's get on to your questions. We're only going to do a couple of these, but as ever, thank you very much for sending these in. I'm going to put this on you guys. Rory has messaged in. Thank you very much, Rory, to say, how do you fit Freeman, Roebuck and Feinberg-Mngomezulu in a backline when all of them are fit?
You probably disappoint
one of them.
Yeah.
Or
at least one of them.
Or you have...
So does that depend on who
Freeman
you're
has
playing
to play.
against?
Freeman has to play 13 if you're going to get them all in, all 15.
So what would you do? Does it depend? Is it horses for courses?
There will be a backline. If everyone is fit, there will be a backline a midfield that will include Lawrence and Freeman. So, and that will need Elliot Daly to be playing somewhere probably in the back 3, probably 15. It will happen, but the thing is, I think we've talked before at the top of this, is it's competition, it's who's in, who's right, and it's a great place to be in, to have these dilemmas.
Actually, this kind of gives us a
Arundel
segue.
in the 23 at the minute, haven't we?
Well, yeah, so this is actually a bit of a segue, so I was only going to do a couple of these, but actually Adam's message in, it's kind of in the same vein, really, is that harsh on Stewart, but did it do England a favour, him having to go off? Felt like Smith's attacking threat, ball playing and pace gave England the dynamism they needed to get back into the game. Is there a feeling, Charles, will come to you on this, that we have to be talking about Marcus Smith in that equation as well, or Freddie Stewart? I mean, there's so many ways to dice it.
I mean, I think Marcus Smith took his chance brilliantly, and he was awesome at fullback, and he can be seen now, I think, as just as sort of dependable a fullback option as fly half. I think maybe his international future will be at 15 rather than at 10, especially with George Ford and Finn Smith ahead of him. Would England have attacked in the same way with Freddie Stewart at 15 if he'd have played the whole game? We'll never know, I suppose. But Freddie Stewart started the game solidly. He looked better under the high ball, more assured under the high ball than against Australia, where he looked a little bit at sea at the start. And he has added attacking dimensions to his game, but certainly England did look good with Marcus there, and maybe it was that extra bit of vision that Marcus brought as a fly half, because we mentioned last week that Dingwall might be a bit of a distributor, but maybe isn't doing as much of it as they would like, or as maybe George Ford would like, and maybe Marcus coming on in those wider channels did certainly add a little bit more zip. England were quicker and better at getting the ball to their wingers. Feinberg-Mngomezulu carried numerous times to great success.
It's time as well. Time together. That's an extra week that they've been training together as a back line, and it's boring to say, but it was likely to look more cohesive.
Yeah. Finlay, thank you for messaging in and asking, has this month highlighted the importance of bench impact in impact on the test, which I think Charles touched on.
Finlay Dimmock.
Was that? No, it's that. Not my son, but it'd be impressive if he could type this. He's highlighted Rassie and Borthwick use of bench, whilst highlighting the fact that Scotland had no second row cover and didn't have the oomph that they wanted off the bench, which is something we touched on. Thank you very much for that, Finlay. Harlequin has messaged in. It's like from the badge, asking, are England risking underutilising Tom Curry as a 20-minute bench player? Now, I think this one is really interesting.
He's getting half an hour for a start, so they're going a little bit earlier, although really quickly to make the point that Steve Borthwick had them ready, didn't he? Had them ready and he held off. That was for the Dingwall try, and I thought that was really smart. Piardi was sort of quite sassy about it, wasn't he? Going sort of, they've changed their mind, and that was the reason they changed their mind. Give them more play.
Sassy.
But maybe, it's about, I think partly it will be about managing Tom Curry's expectations. It might prolong his career, which is quite handy. He is exuding, as I mentioned Marcus, in the same way with Marcus Smith. He looks like a really big presence when he's sort of along the touchline or coming onto the field. He's giving people a lift around him. So I think he really does suit it, although I'm sure he will want to be the 50 or the 80 man
starter. I wonder if he starts this. I think I would start him this weekend against, and I'd probably keep Pepper on the bench. I'd keep it largely the same, but I think I probably would start Tom Curry this. I think as well, there might have been a positive knock-on effect to the line-out with Tom Curry there instead of Pepper as well. I think Pepper is still finding his feet there, and I think England's line-out was, bizarre to say this in a comfortable victory against New Zealand, but it was dreadful, England's line-out, and so maybe that's where it might just come in, where it's Tom Curry, okay, we'll go Curry, Underhill, Earl, and then we've got options there alongside the 2 second rows. I'm guessing Chesham probably won't be fit. I don't know, they might stick with Coles. If Chesham's fit, he might come back in, and then bring Pepper off the bench.
Pepper was immense.
It's not a slight on Guy Pepper in any way. It's more just a rotation, managing the rotation of the autumn, plus looking at the set piece balance.
In a word, no.
Okay, fantastic.
He's coming back from injury. Everyone knows what he can do, and it's a good time for someone like Guy Pepper to get minutes.
Well, as we say, you've got a smorgasbord of fantastic rugby coming up this weekend. That match we're talking about, England play Argentina on Sunday, Scotland play Tonga on Sunday. I'm sure we're all gearing up for that one. On Saturday, we've got Wales versus New Zealand, Ireland versus South Africa. That's going to be an absolute cracker. France play Australia, and Italy are in action against Chile. Thank you very much to Gav and Charlie. Charles, thank you very much for hot-footing it from duty free to be here with us. The four of us will be back next week to unpack that busy weekend of rugby. Also, whilst I've got you, the cricket podcast from Telegraph is launching. You might have heard of the Ashes. That's starting up again this weekend. Please stay with us. Please pay attention to all of our output on Telegraph Sport with that, and listen on any platform you can, or give us a watch for the Telegraph Cricket Podcast. It will be fantastic. The Autumn Nation series, it keeps rumbling on. Thank you very much for sticking with us and listening to our assorted rants. Appreciate it.
Home to the world-renowned Emirates Dubai Sevens, Dubai is the ultimate destination for a sporting break. With a packed events calendar every year, including the DP World Tour Golf Championship and the Dubai Tennis Championships. There are lots of opportunities to witness world-class sport in action. Away from the stands, you'll find plenty of ways to have an active adventure holiday of your own. Try your hand at paddle, the world's fastest growing sport. Walk the breathtaking hiking trails of the Hatter Mountains. Or rent a bike and cycle alongside spectacular skylines. The only problem will be deciding which you want to do first. Swap the winter chill for sunshine and plan your sporty getaway at visitdubai.com.